Hello, hi, I'm Lindsay Scott, and I'm going to be talking about getting ahead in project management. There's actually two parts to this webinar. One is about looking at the current project management job market, but also about how you yourself can differentiate yourself in that marketplace. So before we get into focusing on you and what you can be doing in terms of differentiating yourself, we want to start with this really curious situation that we have in the project management marketplace at the moment. Essentially, we have this thing called the apples and bananas of recruitment, where essentially what's happening is that whatever is required from an organisation in terms of their project management is not actually what's ended up being asked for, which often means that an organisation may have a requirement for certain type of project manager. They go through the entire recruitment process and actually never get to see the kind of project managers that they'd really like to see. And we've seen this came out of our project management benchmark report this year, because essentially it's a frustration that organisations are having, which of course is a frustration that people that are also looking for project management roles also get that knock-on effect. So essentially what it is, you have a hiring manager, so somebody that understands project management within the organisation has a requirement for a new project manager. And it's through translation or lost in translation, Chinese whispers, as it goes through to an HR department, which essentially then the requirement gets turned into a job advertisement. And then before you know it, the advertisement bears no relation to what actually the hiring manager wanted in the first place. So we've got this situation that is essentially frustrating for everybody involved. But the other thing that came out of the Project Management Benchmark report as well this year is trying to understand exactly what it is that organisations, actually really need or really look for in their project managers. And we asked both hiring organisations and also project practitioners just to see whether actually the same results came out. So the interesting thing is that, as you probably expect, that project and program management experience was ranked #1 by both organisations and with practitioners. Yet we start to get a slight difference in terms of what practitioners and hiring organisations think they need in relation to that experience. And the practitioners rate the main experience second, whereas hirers rate the personality and the style as the most important after experience. Now, for a lot of practitioners who may be listening to this, who have even tried to quite possibly change sector or industry sectors or domains, by domains we often mean it can be industry sector, but it can also mean in terms of business domain, so for example finance, HR and so on. So practitioners feel that for them it's got to be able to have demonstrable experience in the sector or the domain that makes them the right kind of project manager. Whereas the discrepancy here is that the hirer is actually looking for personality and style. Now the interesting thing about this is whether we believe it. Because if you look a little bit further, actually this is from quotes from hiring organisations, where some organisations you must have that sector and domain experience if you're going to be successful in the business, whereas some other organisations say, well, you could easily learn it and the domain knowledge and become effective quite quickly. And then we get the downright, well, actually we'll reject them and we'll never even look at them if they don't have that experience within that sector or domain. This has long been a frustration for a lot of people that work in the project management field. I'm sure there's a lot of people here that are listening now that think the great debate about the transferable skills. I think we all know that project management and the technologies, the tools, the techniques that we have could be very easily transferred to other types of organisations, some other kinds of domains. But for a lot of organisations over the last 5 years especially, since the recession hit, is that they became very risk averse to taking on people that didn't fit their very specific profiles in terms of the experience needed, the kind of cultural fit for the person, but also that they've been there and then done this before. They're willing to take almost no risks in bringing in new types of blood into their organisation. So for practitioners, this whole thing is actually quite confusing. So an organisation ranks personality and style second. But the problem that we get with this is that, well, how do hirers when they're wanting to, bring people in for their cultural fit, being just as important as the experience. But how do we do that? Because the issue that we have is that we're using mainly CVs in the recruitment process. That's not changed over that time. So the problem that we have here is that, well, how do we get personality across if that's what organisations are looking for? I'll come back to this later when we talk about how you differentiate yourself, and we'll talk a little bit more about how do we get personality into the recruitment process when looking for new work. We just wanted to, part of the understanding the marketplace is understanding the marketplace and from a practitioner's point of view. I mean, I often get asked questions whenever I meet anybody, what is the project management marketplace like at the moment? And there's never one clear answer, because a project management marketplace is different for each individual project manager depending on the experience they have, the sector that they're working in, the location where they are. So for me to be able to say to you now, listening to this, actually the project management marketplace at the moment is actually quite buoyant. Well, for some sectors it is, for others not so much. So understanding the marketplace from a practitioner's point of view is actually quite an interesting thing, because even though practitioners have not seen good pay rises or good promotions over the last 5 years, and some of these things that you're seeing here, about 73% of practitioners don't expect to rise over inflation, that has pretty much been the case over the last 5 years. You've not seen that change very much at all. One of the things that has been quite interesting this year specifically is if you look at the figures of 9% of practitioners are unemployed, actually that figure was a lot higher, as you'd probably imagine. As soon as the recession hit, yes, there was a lot of people who were unemployed. But what we've found with this, and looking at the data a little bit more closely, is that we've seen that practitioners who were previously permanent employed decided to, rather than hold out and look for permanent work, they decided to turn their hand to contracting. So actually the reduction in unemployment figures in project management is partly, well, quite a lot actually, to do with the people that are thinking, I can go contracting, maybe this is a permanent lifestyle change, or just something to fill the gap until the market comes back, their particular segment of the market comes back for them. But one of the things there, and is an interesting thing for project practitioners we've found over the last 5 years, no matter how many knocks they get, they're actually quite an optimistic bunch. Their own personal confidence is quite high. They see that experience does actually get rewarded within their organisation. But these are just some of the little things that have come out of the report this year, and you can go and have a look at that report. You can available on the website, and you can download that for free. But what I wanted to concentrate on the second part of this presentation is probably the more practical or insights into, okay, so this is the marketplace, so how do I, as a practitioner, make myself known but also stand out from others? You can see there that finding opportunities and differentiating yourself in a crowd is actually still a top concern for a lot of practitioners that are working in project management. So there's the report. You can go and see that online and download that at your leisure. So let's have a look at differentiating yourself in the marketplace. One of the things that we often get asked is, about the vacancies that are available online or through, through job boards or directly on employer websites and things like that. It's actually quite an interesting figure. It's also just worth bearing in mind that because you're worrying about how to differentiate yourself, because a lot of people are all going and fishing in the same place, looking for new opportunities, one of the things you need to be aware of is that actually 80% of vacancies are never actually advertised, which means that if you're all fishing in a very much reduced pool. So the interesting thing is, well, okay, so where do I find them? Where are they? Well, actually one of the things that you should focus on a lot more is actually your own network. And one of the things we'll talk about as we go through this presentation is how to use that network and how to find those opportunities through that network. But essentially, if you ask most people that you know how they found their last role, it'll probably be from somebody that they've either worked with before in the past, who has subsequently moved on to a different organisation and is looking for good people to join them, Or if you're contracting, you'll find that actually when you have your own professional network of other project management contractors, often work will get referred to you because people are always on the lookout for really great project managers with proven experience and essentially somebody to vouch for you. But the other part of that is not just about networking. There is actually that opportunity to approach organisations yourself. So if you're very sure about what it is that you have to offer a particular kind of organisation or a market, you can think about how do you actually approach them directly. Because one of the other things that you often find is if you ask them in your own network, you'll find that when people often when they get in touch with an organisation or they start talking to somebody who works in an organisation, or perhaps you've been for an interview already, you will find that sometimes roles are created for you. And that's just about being there in the right place at the right time. However, you can make it happen for yourself if you're that way inclined and you feel like that actually, yes, I've got a very clear idea about what organisation will be very interested in me right now. So that's just a little bit about, well, you know, are you really fishing in the right place? And are you actually really maximising the people that you already know? Because these are the people, but ultimately they come kind of like your sales force in a way. They're out there with lots of other different types of people and businesses that they're working within, always ready to recommend if an organisation is looking for somebody else. So one of the most important things that you have to think about when it comes to differentiating yourself is that you do actually start thinking about, well, yourself. And one of the things that we often find is that it's a skill that needs to be practiced, it's a skill that often needs to be learned and practiced. And one of the things that, just right up there at the top, is a 2-minute elevator pitch. And that can be 2 minutes or 30 seconds. But the interesting thing is that when we have all people calling into the office looking for project management work, one of the things I always ask them is, well, you know, tell me a little bit more about you. 9 times out of 10, people really struggle with getting to the really succinct points that they need to make that are going to make somebody actually remember who you were, what it is that you've got to offer. I think one of the things that we fall into is that say, I'm a project manager and they work on X types of projects. But actually an elevator pitch is more about trying to build some intrigue as well. So maybe thinking about how your elevator pitch works in terms of, well, what benefits do you bring to a business? What value do you bring to a business? If they didn't have you, what would be the worst case scenario that could have happened if you weren't there? Actually, that's how you lead with some intrigue that allows you to follow up with, here's some details about a particular project, or here's a bit of detail about my particular niche or specialism I have. So it's thinking about impact and it's thinking about the different kinds of people that you're going to meet along the way. So in order to be able to do this, we kind of like deconstruct before we can build up, well, understanding who you are and what you've got to offer. So say, for example, many people I asked about this question, and it was something that was on Julie's presentation around professionalism. There's a whole thing about competency assessments and frameworks. I often ask project managers if they've actually used anything like that before in their career. And I'm actually always astounded to see not a lot of people actually have looked into or used a competency assessment framework on themselves. And the reason why I say this is that actually it's a very good tool to be able to use as a way to understand, well, what are all the key competencies of project management and where is my skill set in relation to those competencies? Do I have a particular niche or specialism or something where I score quite highly? Do I have gaps that I need to be able to essentially look at in the future and think about my personal development? But also use a competency assessment to essentially work out from a CV or writing a profile or something like that. You think about the key competencies of project management and you think about your experiences in relation to them. That's a great way as to how you get away from talking company talk. What I mean by that is that often when you meet project managers and you ask them what it is that they do, their answers are very much tied to the organisation that they're currently working with. And that is the crux of the problem, really, because essentially that's great to describe where you are today, but it doesn't really explain or give somebody an idea about what you're going to do for somebody else in the future. So if you lead more on competencies rather than the ins and outs of a particular type of company project that you've been working on, it helps you to actually change the way that you present yourself, but also trying to find those common things that you know that somebody is going to want to buy from you in the future. So understanding who you are and what you have to offer, I often say with people when they're working on their CVs and things like that, is scrap the current CV that you've got. Because one of the problems that we've found over the last 5 years is that I get so many people that say, well, the CV used to work for me really well, but now it's not really seeming to work in that same way. It's not opening as many doors as it used to do. Well, you know, things have changed, things have moved on, and you know, technology has been one of them. And again, we'll talk about this, the newer technologies that have emerged that you can use alongside a CV as well. But often it means that, you know, it's time to start again with a CV if something's not working for you. And this is the one way that I recommend that if you wanted to start afresh, start looking at the competency assessment and start thinking about what your core competencies are as a project manager, and also thinking about some of the benefits that you bring to an organisation. The interesting thing about it is that I sit there about niches and specialisms, because we said before that organisations have got very risk averse in terms of the kind of people that they're bringing on. So if you can find a particular niche or specialism, and another word for this is essentially putting yourself into boxes, because organisations at the moment are looking to put people in boxes. So one of the best ways for you to be able to differentiate yourself and stand out, whether it would be with your CV or the way that you approach people, is think, well, what box am I, or boxes, because you can be more than one box. Have a think about that, because again, we're trying to counteract this issue where organisations have been very risk averse in who they're bringing on. The interesting thing about this is over the last 5 years, and you know, continuing today, is that the people that do give this a lot of thought and think about, well, how do I write and present this? How do I present it in verbal form? What are some of the other things that I can use that allow me to get across personality and maybe, you know, tap into the bit where the organisations are looking for good cultural fit and so on. So the people that do that and spend time thinking about it tend to see that their opportunities and rates have pretty much stayed stable over the last 5 years, or in some cases even increased. So essentially what we're talking about here is marketing. And I know a lot of people here on the call, listening to the presentation, are going to think, well, you know, I'm not a marketeer. And in fact, you know, 99% of the people who are probably listening, you know, are going to be project managers, and we're well aware of that. But again, when it comes to stuff like this, it's personal development, which is just as important as going on the latest training course for any of your project management areas of expertise, whether it be doing a Prince 2 course or your APMP, anything like that. I think this kind of work is just as crucial, where you can learn the skills to be able to present what it is that you've got to the right kind of audiences at the right time. So all of this, differentiating yourself, boils down to marketing. And of course, with any kind of marketers, we think about different ways that we can do marketing. It's not just a case of, you know, having a shop with a shop window. We're going to do lots of other things as well. Marketing flyers, getting people to entice to come into the shop and read more, or look and talk to us more about what it is that we do. So there are different tools and different ways to do that. And again, we'll talk about some of those things that have become a lot more common more recently. And through all of this is that you never stop pushing your brand, or for want of a better phrase, you never stop thinking about where opportunity might be. So as much as you could be listening to this and thinking, I've been in a permanent role for a number of years, I'm very comfortable, very happy, thanks. Actually, you never know what's around the corner. So you really do need to think about, at the very least, keeping in touch with your network, because you never know when the opportunity, you know, might come where you can't resist it, and you'd like to make sure that you're ready for that. One of the things that we can't get away from, as much as many people hate it, is the CV. I mean, unfortunately, it's here to stay, been around for a while. People have frustrations with it, but, you know, in a recent survey that Alice has just literally done this week, we found that its organisations still rate
the CV as their #1 way of trying to identify people that they want to bring in and interview. So it's here to stay. And also, today there's actually been a report out on the BBC news website about this first point here, about how a CV has to change for each opportunity. It's been identified as the most common mistake that people make. That's above things like spelling mistakes and so on. But it has to change for each opportunity that you're going for. And the reason why that is because project management in particular is very varied, and organisations have very varied ideas about what a project manager is to them. So you really need to think about the opportunities that are presented to you and thinking about, does the CV that I have here need the tweaks? Does it need tailoring a little bit? So if you're not doing this for each opportunity, if you start doing this, you're already starting to differentiate yourself. The other thing there about relevancy, it has to also be relevant to a particular role that you're going for. So for example, there is a difference between PMO support type CVs than there is project managers. But there's also a difference between project managers and senior project managers, and again between senior project managers and program managers. So the CV and the way that you write about the roles actually do change, or should change. So they have to be relevant, because when I pick up a CV and I start reading about a program manager that's applied for a role, I'm expecting to see program level experience, competency, skills, experience, and so on. It also has to sell you, of course, and I think one of the things that people struggle with is actually, well, what do I keep in, what do I keep out, how do I write about what I've got, how do I make it interesting, how do I get people to read more of it, because I think many people probably don't realise just how little of the CV gets read, because you've got literally seconds to make an impact, right from the top through to the front page. It's what we call the shop window. The first page is essentially 80% is the most important bit. And if you're not using the right kind of terminology or trying to hook people, they won't read it. They won't read all of it, because that's your opportunity gone. That opportunity you had to sell yourself has just been passed over. One of the other things there is about control as well, and it's just an awareness that I think many people will be aware of, is again, what do you keep in, what do you take out? And it's things like date of birth, full addresses, things like that allow you to be easily identified in potentially online fraud, because we have to think about things like this as the world is changing to be more online. But as much as I hate CVs, here we are, we've got them, this is what people want to see, so it's up to us to make sure that we're doing the best we can in order to get them read. And this one here, you'll be happy to know is a CV that we wouldn't recommend. It's about, take a look at that CV, and the first thing is photos. There's probably jumping out at you there. One of the things that you don't do in the UK is had pictures. But what we can do with pictures is use them in a LinkedIn profile. More on that in a bit. One of the things that we really don't like is things like, the images there you can see of some of the things that this person's been doing accreditation-wise. You can see the full list of technical stuff there. It's actually a lot more common than you think. But remember, this is a shop window. This is the equivalent to looking at those dead flies that you see in shop windows. This person's not making any impact to me at all, and if it is any impact, it's all for the wrong reasons. Have a look at some of the things down there at the bottom that you can't quite make them out, but it's things like listing some of the activities that project managers do. To me, that's not selling the benefit or why I should take you on as a project manager. You're missing the opportunity there to actually sell yourself. So if you talk about business cases, for example, or if you're talking about putting together project plans, we'd expect a lot more stuff in there in terms of, well, how did you do it? I think that's the important question. And everything that you write down in a CV, you should always say afterwards, so what? So for this guy, business cases, so what? Yes, project managers do business cases. I don't know if you're any good at it. I don't know what kind of business cases you were writing. You get no feel for this person at all. One of the other things that we recommend for people when they're putting together a CV is just thinking, about the three most important bits. The three most important are your 80%, which is essentially your first page. You've got opportunity there with a LinkedIn profile, again, because people are checking on LinkedIn, you may as well use that. But the three important things are your objectives, or your profile, the key achievements, and then your career history. So, for example, with the profile, there is a formula that we've used and tried and tested over the years that allow you to really pinpoint and try and hook people in that first bit. And as you can probably imagine, it's the profile that will probably work really well with a little bit of tailoring or tweaking. Key achievements is another area that many people stumble or fall over, talking about things that, essentially, well, this is a project manager's job. We'd expect you to be performing really well on things like delivering on time, in budget, and so on. Actually, with the key achievements is a really great area on the CV to, number one, talk about benefit and value, which is really underestimated in a lot of project managers' CVs, and just how it can be a really great area of your CV to really hook into the role that you're interested in going for, because actually you can then start to change your key achievements and shuffle them around a bit. So what you do when you see a new opportunity, you think about, well, what can my key achievements be in relation to the kind of stuff that they're asking for? And this is stuff about going above and beyond what it is you do on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, with project managers, some of the key achievement things there might be if you're very much about turning around troubled projects or projects that are failing, and it's thinking about, this is what I did, this is the situation, this is what I did, this was the outcome for the business. And then, of course, you've got career history, which again is where a lot of the people are going to be looking for what's the core competencies that this person's been working within. Can I get a clear mental picture of the kind of project and kind of organisation they've been working within? There's a lot of stuff there that people get confused about in terms of what I should keep in or keep out. Let's talk about this latest thing that a lot of people are getting tuned to, which is great from a social media point of view, which is obviously project managers. It's LinkedIn, and you can just see just how much it's been growing, by 20% over, 72% of people using it 2 years ago. We're now pretty much straight or getting there at 92%. So, okay, there's no differentiation there that people are using project management, people working within project management are using LinkedIn. But the interesting thing about it is just who gets approached and things like that, because a lot of organisations are using it to find people rather than advertising online and in other places. The interesting thing for me is when I'm talking to practitioners about, well, how are you utilising LinkedIn? Because, essentially you've been given an opportunity that allows you to bolster your CV, and I think probably 9 times out of 10 people are just using it as an online CV, and pretty much it matches their CV. But LinkedIn is a great tool for starting to inject a bit more of your personality. And we've seen that that's what organisations are wanting to get more of a feel for. So to use LinkedIn as just another place to cut and paste a CV is really missing the point. And if you want to start thinking about, well, actually, how could I use this differently? I mean, I've got some great stories from project people that have really thought about how do they summarise their work on there that makes it very different to a profile. How do they bring it to life? I mean, in some ways, the LinkedIn profile now almost feels like a little mini website. You're able to add links to it. You're able to upload documents. If you've got a niche or specialism or a certain area that you work within, you could put together a 5-page little presentation that gives a real good flavour of you at work solving those problems and how you do it. You don't have that opportunity with a CV. But LinkedIn is great for showcasing some different ways or different types of experience that you've got. So be aware that don't just use it as another place for you to just cut and paste your CV. Now, coming back to again about how do we differentiate yourself, we talked about networking, and LinkedIn is obviously it is first and foremost supposed to be a professional networking site rather than a job board. But I think people are slowly forgetting that in some ways, because the opportunity there is twofold. It allows you to stay in touch with your current network, but also build new ones as well. So you should be always thinking about people that you've met along the way, connect via LinkedIn. But you should always send a few words of introduction. It's nothing more irritating than getting connections from people when you've got no idea who they are. You've also got to think about letting people into your network too, because the way that LinkedIn works, as soon as you make a connection to somebody, they can then see your entire network as well. So be precious with it. Take introductions from people that at least have either met in person or you've met online, which is perfectly acceptable as well. The other thing about using LinkedIn to this best advantage is not using a new connection or somebody that's quite a new connection and asking them for something. Actually, LinkedIn should be about giving first of all, before you're in a position where you should be taken. So think about how you want to cultivate the relationship. Again, there's nothing worse than perhaps somebody knocking on your door asking for some money or asking for this, that and the other when you don't know them from Adam. So think about how that works online. It's exactly the same thing. So what is it that you can give and receive? Well, there are a lot of LinkedIn groups, for example, that you can add your experience and your thoughts and your comments. It's a great way to make up new connections in different sectors or domains from yourself. But also it's about being able to get back in touch with people, finding what are they up to, and getting in touch and having a coffee, meeting up really, rather than just doing it all online. So you're thinking continuously about your network, and LinkedIn is just one way that helps you to cultivate that and keep on top of it, really. And again, with LinkedIn, you should be doing it little and often. There's great ways that you can just tap in, little status update goes around to all your network, and that could be that you're meeting up with such and such for a coffee, or I'm in town next week, is anybody around, fancy meeting up for a coffee? It's things like that I think people need to have a little bit more thought about where they could go with this, in terms of, we know that a lot of our opportunities come through people that we know, so let's make sure it keeps us in touch with them. So there we go, do it little and often, status update, keep checking it, because anybody who does view your profile, you're able to see that. Think about how you want to be contacted. If it's jobs and opportunities, make sure that's very clear. Again, if you're on a contracting freelance, you can also think about how you can use LinkedIn just a little bit more professional in terms of giving you a bit more of a shop window. You can use a customizable URLs, you can use it on your emails, CVs and other profiles and things like that. I've added that you can add the different applications, you can upload presentations, you can have links out to various websites and so on. There's a lot more you can do with it. So if you've not looked at LinkedIn in the last 6 months or so, go back, have a look, think about how I can start to tap into using LinkedIn as something in addition to a CV, but just opens out a little bit more, something about me that gives more the clue as to the kind of approach that I take when I manage projects, kind of personality that I've got. So this is a shortened version. There's loads of advice available online. You can have a look at the benchmark report as well, and also the CV template that I shared there, the one without the photograph, is a template is available online, and you can go and download that too. Okay, thank you very much.